Good day. It sure has warmed up today. First time I've been able to not wear my sweatshirt and a jacket. It's really nice. So, today it's March 12th, 2019. And this following story, and I'm gonna classify it as a fiction, so it'll make it easier. And if there's any familiarity or similarity to any world that you live on, it is just completely in your mind. It's a figment of your imagination. Now, I'm not going to name any names in this, and I'm not going to make any exact depictions for the purpose of what they don't call censorship, but growing tendency with anybody filming or saying anything that if it hurts somebody's feelings, or they call it copyright infringement. Of course, in the old days, you weren't infringing on anybody's copyright if you gave their full name and gave what you were saying credit to someone else, didn't claim it yourself. But now any reference association can be, if you are deemed anti-something, they don't want you associated by naming somebody else. Guilt by association, in a sense. It's just a new form of censorship, but they call it something else so they can get by. So, no names. Okay, this is a tale. Now, some of you who have done a lot of studying have heard reference made to a rocket scientist that gained prominence in this country through the 1950s, but was actually dated way back into the 1930s in Germany. And he was brought over to this country, welcomed, and he was one of the key rocketeers in the 50s and 60s, and one of his right arm people, helpers, was a woman, and she claimed that this guy had told her decades previously, I don't know whether it was in the 50s or 60s, that the wars were just made up, and the World War I and World War II were created by the then powers that be, or bankers, or whoever you want to call it, to get certain things done. And he said that there'd be a Cold War after the World War II, and then he had said that after that there'd be a war on terrorism, and then he said after that there'd be a war in outer space, supposedly against aliens or something. So what I'm doing is giving you a fictitious version of the space war. And it should be gaining popularity or interest in this subject because of a president wanting to create a space force, which is actually not just an extension or more fully recognition of a space command that already exists in an Air Force. So those forces already exist. This would be just making them bigger and making them more officially recognized. And my guess is that It would be just allowing more money to come in to the forces, the military-industrial complex, so that more black programs could be done and more secret stuff could be done, and the public wouldn't be any wiser to it. So if we become more familiar with this war in space, maybe it won't come to be. Just as if this war on terrorism, if more people were aware, which of course growing people are, but as long as the official media says something else, it doesn't matter if 90% of the population knows that it's all false flags and fake. Officially, the news media, the universities, the colleges, the education institutions, the government, people that normally the public listens to, as long as they keep saying something, it doesn't really matter whether 60, 70, 80, 90% of the population recognizes it as BS. So one thing that you have to understand about the space war is what space is. Space isn't just what's up there in the heavens, in the sky, and out further in the sky, and between here and the moon, and between here and the sun. It's what's around each one of us in all the dimensions. The space around a molecule. There's a lot of things happening in that space around a molecule. Just because you can't see a molecule or even the space around the molecule doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Most of you who have any education understand what a molecule is, or a cell of a body, and understand what I'm saying. Well, in more dimensions than the three, you have things that are not even seen. A lot of people understand the fourth dimension as time, which actually you understand it better if you recognize time as the fifth, and the fourth is just the elevation of the three dimensions. And the more vibration, the more vibration, the more that's happening in that dimension, that space, the higher that dimension goes until it gets into the fifth dimension, which is even more than time. It's the unseen, the non-physical, and the full completion or complementation of time itself, which is composed of not just future, but past and present. And of course, that's another big subject. But you've heard some of the Eastern Asian philosophies talk about time, true time existing, past, present, and future. So, getting back to the war on terrorism, if more people realized and talked about and recognized and formally recognized and officially recognized that terrorism has been created since the war on terrorism started. So when the war on terrorism first began, there really weren't any terrorists, or very, very, very few. And it's only through that war on the general population by supposedly these eradicators of terrorism do terrorists truly come into existence. So this reflects back again onto the Eastern philosophy, as if you're combating an enemy or an opposite force to you, the more energy you put into it, the more power that opposing force gains. So it is gaining its strength through you. So understand how that is applied on the war on terrorism, just as it was applied on the Cold War and even World War II, and well, all wars, that if you perceive somebody as your enemy and you perceive it to the enough of degree that they're a threat, you will go out and attack them. Just like the war on terrorism, the war on Iraq. Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. They're going to use it against us. We have to make them safe for democracy by invading them. Of course, they don't say it invading. They say we're making those people safe for democracy. Well, maybe those people didn't want democracy. Maybe they were quite happy the way they were. Well, not totally happy, but things weren't too bad. And if you look at old pictures of Iraq before a bunch of these countries got together and went in to make them safe for democracy, you'll see a fairly high level of civilization. There was very little discrimination against religions. Gee, that sounds like Syria and sounds like Libya, sounds like Afghanistan a little bit, sounds like Iran, sounds like Venezuela. But you look at the present pictures of Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan, and a lot of these cities are totally bombed out. They look like London and a lot of the cities in Germany at the close of World War II. Devastation, bombs, 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 bombs. So you compare the before to the after, and you ask the people, do you like life today in this bombed out shell of a country where there's no electricity, or very little electricity, standard of living is real bad, or did you like it before? I hope I don't have to answer that. But how many people, including some of my relatives, one of my relatives, I hate to say it, when I was trying to describe Iran and told him, well, he should see it today to believe it, and he said, oh, the only way I'd want to see Iraq was through the sights of a bombing site from an airplane or a jet above. Anyway, so you get the point about what the war on terrorists is, or any war. Any war, the people who are instigating it really at the top, behind the scenes, like the Wizard of Oz, the person behind that curtain that's pulling the levers, they're the only ones that really benefit from a war, and all their underlings, which is like the military-industrial complex. They benefit by more hours of work and more payment and more trickle-down economics. So when you hear the term all wars are bankers' wars, that's a fairly true statement. And you can go to the bank on that one. So, back to the theme of this, the topic of this video, movie, whatever you want to call it, the space war, which is not just coming, it's already here. It's It can just become more so if you all fall for it. Yeah, so there's that small multi-dimensional universe around ourselves, around the planet, around the solar system. And there's that unseen world, the fifth dimension. A lot of people have called this the spirit world. And this may sound religious, and if you're not into religions, that's fine, but don't turn this off just because I'm talking about Luciferianism or Satan. These terms you can see in Assyrian literature. You can see it in just about any ancient texts, that there was wars and that there was opposing forces, whether you want to call them spiritual, unseen. There were gods, Syrian gods. There's a familiarity with all this, including the native populations of South America and North America, the Aborigines of Australia. You'll see that a lot of these stories are quite similar. And there's a reason for that, because maybe they all have the same, they're all different versions of different tongues, of different people attempting to pass ancient history down to the present. That's why they're familiar. That's why they're quite similar. So I may use some Christian terms because they're so well known. I may use some Syrian stuff such as Enki and Enlil, but it's all quite the same. In a way, the Syrian texts are a little more understandable because they don't have quite the religious flavor to them as Satan or Lucifer does. So anyway, there was this opposition way back. Because Satan and Lucifer are actually different entities. Lucifer was, in a sense, was the brother of Yahshua. There were two brothers. One was the positive brother and one was the negative brother. And in the Garden of Eden, the snake, or Lucifer, or whatever you want to call him, Enlil or Enki, came into the garden and attempted to instruct Adam and Eve of the greater universe, the greater world, because he said that God hadn't been totally truthful to Adam and Eve. So he was going to give them a fuller story. So today, this Lucifer is picked on because he spilled the beans. Now, I'm not judging him. I'm saying that really he was wrong, according to God, to give Adam and Eve that much knowledge, because they weren't ready for it, or they were not capable in God's eyes of dealing with that. Or he knew that if they knew some of these secrets, they would make a mess of the garden. And that's why they got thrown out of the garden. Well, this story just sounds kind of like today, with the pharmaceutical industry, big ag. We got these GMO products. These GMO seeds that are gonna make the world a better place. Of course, they don't tell the whole story about how much deleterious things are in these genetically modified organisms, and how they go against the natural way, tries to circumvent it, upsets things, and makes the whole pie, the whole garden, your whole garden, a big mess, and actually ends up poisoning Adam and Eve and whoever eats out of that garden. See, so maybe God was right and Lucifer was wrong. Maybe one of the Enlil and Enki brothers was right. But again, I'm not judging him. I'm trying to give you the fuller picture. Today, somebody that tries to say what I'm saying, the bigger picture, is rocks are thrown at them or censored or said, that guy's a Nazi or something. You're hurting my feelings, so nobody should listen to that. In a sense, I'm telling you too much. I'm giving you too much of the picture. And a lot of people can handle it, I'll admit it. That's why there's different groups on the earth, and why there should be different groups. We should be free to join those different groups. And if you understand what I've said in other videos, actually that all exists. You are allowed to make applications, sign up, become a citizen of the U.S. Incorporated and receive these benefits. You're free to do that or not. Now you're mostly enticed or coerced into doing that, but all you have to say is, hey, I'm being coerced, you're threatening me, and usually those forces will back off. That's a lot. So getting back to this battle in space, as you go out from the garden, and if you've got all your senses turned on, you start receiving all this information about, hey, there's more to this than what first appears. And if you're really open, you realize there's more unseen than the seen. There's more unphysical than there is physical. And of course, the modern scientists, they don't want to look at that unphysical, and that's their choice, but we shouldn't be forced into their myopic vision, because they're never going to understand time. They're never going to understand gravity in their little 3.5 dimensional cubosphere they've imprisoned themselves in. God, Lucifer's brother, has our spirits after we die. And those that have elevated their spirits or their understanding, their karma, they can be taken off world to heaven. Those that can't are not transported, they're left around the earth. And so that's what's meant by the prison planet. And that's why so many of the spaceships, satellites, or whatever that are sent to Mars and even to Moon have problems, because man has not yet reached the level where he can really truly leave this planet. In a sense, the Moon and Mars and the other planets are off base to 3.5-dimensional earthlings, to the military-industrial complex, to the modern scientists that are 3.5 dimensions, to the United States Incorporated, the one world corporations. They're not fully allowed onto the moon and Mars. They have to stay here on the prison planet. So, I'm losing my train of thought here. There's that war in space. I call it an interdimensional war. And the powers that be, the ones that are running the media, are going to tint it to those listening that there's these evil forces out there and we need to go to war against them and create a bigger mess. Just like the war in terrorism, just like the Cold War, just like the World War II, just like most of the wars. If you go out there with it in your mind to attack and conquer space, you're attacking and attempting to conquer something that's bigger than you. So you do it in that frame of mind, you're going to have problems. You're going to have a big war on your hands. So you can have it your way. You can have a future war in space, war with aliens, whatever you want to call it, war with spirits, war with your consciousness, war with your own being, war with your fellow beings, war with entities that don't have a soul, like corporations. You get what I'm saying? I'll get back with you on more of this because there's so much more to it. Yeah. Goodbye for now.